Tomorrow, 18-hour special initiative that celebrates the undying entrepreneurial spirit of micro, small and medium enterprises. This is the only daily MSME platform in the country, a show where you can voice your concerns and get answers to all your queries directly from our team of experts. We understand the issues that you, the MSME entrepreneur, face, and this show aims to bring you the most relevant and the most updated information on everything related to your businesses. Now, we bring you the best of the biggest names in industry, whether they're Indian or global. And tonight on our global segment, Global Eye, I'm featuring a series of interviews which were done as a part of Emphasis' Unleash Your Personal Next Self-Transformation for Sustainable Success in New York. Recently, I spoke with CEOs, founders and entrepreneurs across industries and business practices to bring you, the MSME, a global perspective. Listen in. The Leaders of Tomorrow talks to MSMEs and entrepreneurs.
Right.
I'd like for you to talk to our MSMEs and entrepreneurs about how they can possibly use technology when it comes to collaborating with larger peers. You, for example, were talking about, if you don't have the funds to be able to access technology, possibly tie up with an organization that does that.
Right.
But in a market which has been leveled now by technology, which means that MSMEs are competing with their larger peers, how can technology possibly be their biggest tool?
Well, at the end of the day, I'm thinking about some of the innovation I'm seeing, that technology and what's happening. And larger companies have to take advantage and work with smaller companies in key emerging markets. So whether it is in a market like South Africa or India or China, you can't go in there without leveraging technology, but you also need the expertise of the people in the market, because there's the culture. And how is that market using that technology is different than how they use it in North America or another market. So as you look at these different global markets, for example, there's parts of Africa where they didn't have a banking infrastructure, but they use cell phone technology to develop a banking infrastructure, and that basically has transformed that market. And so a big player now has to work with that technology-enabled banking system on the ground in that emerging market. I believe that's the opportunity for entrepreneurs in emerging markets like India, where they can develop infrastructure and technology solutions where bigger companies are going to have to partner with them when they go in that market.
You also overlook CSR at your company.
Yes, I do.
CSR has been in focus in India of late because the government has mandated that 2% of the profits of certain companies needs to necessarily go towards CSR. Talk to us about your own views on CSR and how companies can ensure that CSR is not just something that's done top-down, but it's not just a part of, it becomes a part of the business culture, essentially.
Right. So number one, it's about the values that we have. And corporate social responsibility for our company reflects our values, which is about going into communities and having integrity, and that's actually taught to every employee that we value that, and that's important as you roll out a CSR program. The other thing is education. When people come to the company, it is seen, and we talk about CSR. And then also you have ongoing education and training around all the different pillars of CSR. So people say, what's CSR? It's philanthropy, it's diversity, it's sustainability, it's ethics, it's responsible sourcing, it's how you do your business and how you integrate that into everything you do. And so when people start to see that we have all of these different pillars and we're doing them across the organization, they say, oh, you are walking the talk. And I think that's very important. When we're in India, we've had our company, the CSR tax, for us was easy for us to participate because we already do a lot of philanthropy in the country. The example is that we have Crystal House, where we have a relationship with that organization throughout the world. Mexico, they're in India, they're in North America. And we partner and educate children as well as provide them health benefits in countries where they need access. And we actually make sure that they get an education, and then from that education that they go to college. And what we found is a trickle effect, right? It helps the whole family when you do that. So that, for my company, comes down to values first, having a credible program that we educate and train about, and then when we participate in a CSR tax like the one that is India, it is easier for us because we already have a program that we've been doing for many, many years.
We've been talking to a series of entrepreneurs who've started out really young. And a lot of them tell us that age has both been an advantage as well as a disadvantage for them when turning entrepreneur. What has your own experience been?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we started the company about a year ago. Me and my two co-founders are all around the age of 30. And, age has certainly been a positive and a negative. I think on the positive side, it gives us a unique, fresh perspective. So what we do is we sell mattresses, a typical old school sort of product you buy at a store, and we sell them online directly to consumers through personalization, essentially meaning we customize each mattress for each individual consumer or couple. And because we're a digitally native company, it helps that the three of us really think from a digitally native perspective. And that means that, when we think about a store, we don't think about a traditional brick and mortar store necessarily, but how does a store defined as your website really work? How do people want to flow through your website? And so that's been super helpful as we've begun to build a team and a culture that really makes sense for our brand. On the challenges side, in general, being younger is tougher in a manufacturing perspective. So dealing with older manufacturers who are used to sort of producing products for sort of older, more archaic companies. And so that's a challenge we've had to sort of play through over the last year and a half.
My next is a two-part question, and I want to talk about fundraising. So while the startup culture in India is really booming, funds seem to largely be going towards those startups that use a lot of technology, whereas traditional industries, manufacturing industry, still say it's very hard for them to raise funds. What's the environment like here in the US?
Yeah, I think the environment changes quite quickly. Fundraising in general for true pure play technology companies is generally easier, mostly because the requirements to start from a fundraising perspective are a lot lower, i.e. you don't need to show product market fit, you basically just have to have a piece of technology and a story that people can believe. In our industry and in a lot of other e-commerce related industries, not necessarily manufacturing, but e-commerce, they really want to understand the metrics. Do you understand your customers? Can you sell a product? Can you find product market fit? That's a concept that has grown in the US pretty robustly over the last couple years. What I've seen in India, and again, I'm no expert at this, but what I've seen is that it's growing, and it definitely will follow those same trends as sort of e-commerce as a category continues to grow, and people realize that the e-commerce is not just sort of predicated on the Amazons and Baidus of the world, but can really be sold by specific brands through an online portal.
For young entrepreneurs and founders, I assume understanding digital and social would be a lot easier than, say, for someone who's slightly older, an entrepreneur who's slightly older. Would you advise it's necessary then for MSMEs and entrepreneurs to hire an external expert to help them talk digital?
It's a good question. I think that the question isn't necessarily understanding digital, it's how fast you can move with those digital decisions. And so, the question generally comes in the form of, as a small company versus a big company, it's very obvious. Big companies have a hard time moving fast. If the older founder is from that mentality, it's hard to sometimes transition to making decisions in a rapid-paced environment. In terms of whether or not you need to be young to understand the digital environment, I definitely don't think that's the case. I think that we work with many people who are older than us, younger than us, that understand specific pieces of digital. It's just sort of getting area expertise, essentially.
How do you also ensure that you're creating a brand online at a time when, tools like, say, Twitter are being used by everybody to comment and, try to build an image across verticals, across industries? How do you ensure that social and digital are being used to create a brand which is responsible in that sense?
No, it's a great question. It's something that we think a lot about, especially because, to truly come out and build a brand, you need a ton of money. And so there's things that you have to do to essentially be more efficient with that. Problems that companies like ours are always facing are, do we spend dollars on brand building or do we spend dollars on acquisition? And how do we sort of play between those two different areas? I think at its core, there's sort of two areas of brand. There's sort of building brand awareness and then building an awesome brand itself as your company. And the second one is something, I don't care if you have $30 million or $10 $10,000, you can do the second one. And that's just required by making sure you treat customers fairly, making sure that you really care about their journey, care about your employees, care about every single touch point that people see. And that just sort of builds itself out. But it's definitely something we think about. We actively are on all the social media channels. We spend a lot of time thinking about how do we interplay and speak to customers through that avenue. Because at the end of the day, you can talk to customers in a lot of different ways, and the way that you talk to customers on Facebook or Twitter is different than the way you talk to customers on Instagram, is different than the way you talk to customers on your website, essentially. And what's really interesting that we've seen is that customers, more so than ever, are using the social channels as sources of information and customer service, essentially. So if you have questions about the product, gone are the days of people calling and emailing. People are asking you questions on Twitter. People are asking you questions on Facebook.
Let's take a quick break on that note, but on the other side, we'll continue our focus on Global Eye. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight we're bringing you a series of interviews that we've done with global entrepreneurs and experts. Listen in. Let's start by talking really about the CEO Connection and how you work so closely with organizations across industries and verticals.
So we're the only membership organization in the world that's focused on mid-market companies and CEOs. That is, companies between 100 million and 3 billion in revenue. Our mission is to help them succeed, and we do this by connecting them to each other. We have over 17,000 in our community, connecting them to people, information, and resources to which they otherwise would not have access, and representing the interest and the perspective of the mid-market because nobody else is doing it. We're essentially part peer group, part co-op purchasing group, and part trade association.
So what are some of the biggest challenges that you are hearing from this group in terms of mid-market companies, and how possibly are they working to try and find solutions to those challenges here in the US?
Number one is talent, the war for talent. Finding people is a big challenge for mid-market companies. They're too small to be big and they're too big to be small. So they're competing with the Fortune 500 companies, and they have to be a little bit more creative about it. Interestingly enough, it's kind of the place where innovation meets scale, because they have enough scale to make things happen, but they still are flexible enough to be innovative. So they're using that to their advantage. And in fact, one of the things that CEO Connection is doing is banding them together to leverage the combined resources to give them greater reach. So we've created a college internship program where we've helped mid-market companies get connected to more college students than they can get on their own, and that's the process for them finding talent.
So on the Leaders of Tomorrow, we have a Callin Show where about 75% of all queries that come to us from entrepreneurs is related to finance, but about 10% is related to HR. They say they aren't able to find the right talent. They ask us how they should go about retaining talent because they're competing not just with their peers, but they're also competing with larger companies, particularly for tech-enabled startups. What would your number one advice be in terms of how really to find the right fit talent and how to retain that talent?
I think it's a couple of things. I think first of all, it's difficult for particularly the smaller businesses to do it on their own. So the first thing would be to join together and leverage the combined resources to find the talent. It's really much more effective that way. In terms of retaining them, I think once you get them, you have to keep them happy, engaged, and give them the things that they want. And you know what? Interestingly enough, there's no one answer to that. So you got to get to know the individual employees and figure out exactly how to help them.
You were also very briefly talking about the quality of manpower, and that's interesting because, for example, the IT industry body in India a few years ago came up with a survey that said only 25% of all students coming out of colleges now in India are employable, have the right skill sets to be employed. Is that a challenge here in the US? And what advice do you have about how, that shortfall can be overcome?
So it is a challenge, and in fact, we had a big discussion about that at our last mid-market convention, which we hold at Wharton each year, and the discussion started about, well, how do we get the curriculum at the colleges to change in order to meet the different skills that we need, but it morphed into, let's create this internship program where we can train the students exactly the way they want them. And so this internship program is evolving into not only a way to source new talent, but it's also a way to train them. And it's been pretty effective.
So is training by companies at an individual level really the only solution? Because we're talking about mid-market companies, we're talking about smaller companies, and that's an additional cost that they have to take on.
It's not the only solution, but it is a really powerful solution because it's one that's completely within their control. Certainly, you can source from other people, and you start, then you get into that war for talent where you're going and trying to get talent from other companies. Not so easy to do, and you have to be able to offer and compete in a way that you may not be able to.
Everyone is talking digital now. Whether you're in India, whether you're in the US, everyone is talking digital, everyone is talking tech. For a mid-market company, how, in your opinion, can tech be a great enabler? Because it is becoming a level playing field for small companies as well because of technology. How can it be possibly their biggest tool and advantage?
Well, the first thing is, this movement to the cloud. The mid-market companies, again, stuck in the middle, not quite sure. They're expected to be big, too big to be small, too small to be big, like I said before. And so the challenge there is, how do you shift over to the cloud in a way that is cost effective for them and doesn't scare their operations people to death? And it is a challenge, but we're getting there.
So what would your advice be in terms of how to move to the cloud, how to use SaaS, how to understand what IoT is all about? Is it necessarily going to be hiring someone who's capable in those fields? How is it something that can possibly be, bottom up and not necessarily top down when it comes to embracing technology?
Interestingly enough, I don't think there's one specific answer. I think it's a comprehensive approach, right? And I think you do have to have the right people in place. You also have to have the right advisors. I mean, if you look at a company like Emphasis, you can sit down with them, talk to them, and they're able to help you kind of go through all of this. And then part of that process is evaluating what's out there and what's the best use for your company and your operations. It's bringing everybody on board and taking them through the process.
I want to start by talking to you about some of the unique challenges possibly that entrepreneurs face when it comes to hiring talent and retaining talent, because the entrepreneurs who write into us on the Leaders of Tomorrow say that they're competing not just with their peers, but they're competing also with larger companies, and it's not a fight that can be fought on money. So your advice?
Well, the advice is really, you've got to create the kind of atmosphere that they want to work at. You've got to give them the kind of problems they want to work on. Big corporations, I've run both big corporations and small corporations. They have the same problem. How do you get the right kind of people to work for you? And then how do you keep them once they're there? It's really, I think, about inspiring them. It's not really about the cash. More and more people tell me these days, yeah, I want a good job, I want to have a good career, but for me, I want to do something fun. I want to work on interesting problems. I want to make sure I'm learning. So you need to create the kind of environment that people feel like I'm really learning something, I'm advancing in my career, I'm really having fun in the problems I'm trying to solve. And I think that's the way you keep talent. Make it a fun place to be.
How can technology then be a tool for entrepreneurs when clearly they aren't fighting the fight and the war as far as money is concerned?
Well, technology defines everything these days. I mean, technology is disrupting virtually every major industry on the planet. So for an entrepreneur, they really need to use the technology in their business. How will technology affect their business? And whatever they think they know today, 5 years from now, it's all going to be different. That's the one thing that's been proven true with the massive advance that's going on in technology today. When I started my career many years ago, you could look 5 years out and see your competitors coming at you. You can't do that anymore. Somebody in a garage in Silicon Valley is inventing something today that's going to destroy major businesses tomorrow. And so if you're really looking as an entrepreneur, whether you're a big corporation or an entrepreneur, you have to constantly be up on technology, understand what the opportunities are, understanding how it can affect your customers or your business or your cost base, and make sure you're really on top of it, because it will really define most major businesses going forward.
Talk about digital in today's age, and not just about the industry that you're in or that we're in, but talk about digital across the board. How do you ensure that as a company you stay ahead of the curve, you understand what digital is, and you're able to have solutions and products which then are very relevant to the changes that are happening in technology?
I think you've got to hire the right people who actually understand digital. I quite frankly don't understand why everyone wants to share all the things they want to share these days. But the reality is digital is moving so quickly. Lots of people have different ideas about what are the opportunities, where can we grow. You've got to make sure you're an organization that's embracing the opportunity that digital provides for us and then figuring out how to incorporate it. You can't say, well, we don't do that here or we don't do it that way. You need to look at the way other people are doing things, understand how digital can help your organization either reduce your costs, improve your customer experience, improve your revenue streams in some way, shape, or form, and more importantly, give you the data and analytics to help you really understand what's going on in your business. What really has changed to today's world is the amount of data that's available to us. If you really can harness the data that's available in your corporation and understand how it's changing your customer base or creating better products or finding new customers, data is really what's empowering from the digital world. Data is being collected, being analyzed, and it's really powering our businesses.
We love asking the experts who come on our show about one piece of advice that they've perhaps received in their professional life that has changed the way you think. Is there anything that you would like to advise our viewers?
I think from very early on in my career, someone told me that you should approach your entire career as a learning experience. When you graduate from the best universities in the world, you're a carpenter who's never built a house before. You know how the tools work, you know how to cut the boards, you know how to use the nails, but you've never built a house. You should approach your career as a learning experience and always try to take on the hard jobs. Don't be afraid of failure. Always look to learn, make sure that you are learning in your job. And quite frankly, if you've stopped learning in the job you're in, go get a new one because your career has just stopped.
With that, it's a wrap on this episode of the Leaders of Tomorrow Global Eye Special. We'd love to hear from you, so do feel free to get in touch with us at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. You can reach us on social media by using the hashtag LOT. You can tweet at me at Sunanda_J or call us on that number you see on your screens. We promise to have all your queries answered. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.